Just as a point of what we're going to go through today, first I want to talk a little bit about those who are not with us anymore because of work zone intrusions. Some of our employees, which represent a great number of others across the United States, and we'll get into those numbers a little later. We'll talk about what is a work zone intrusion, what can we do about it, and then what are some of the actions that we can do going forward. So those are a few of the topics we'll talk about over the next 20 minutes or so. So as you can see, here's 4 of our employees who in the last 14 months are not with us anymore. Over the past 14 months, the people in the upper 2 pictures passed away in a work zone intrusion due to a drunk driver at the same time. They were both working on a paving machine when a drunk driver came into the work zone and hit them, and they're not with us anymore. The lower left, Frank Donaldson, also passed away due to a drunk driver. And then the last one in the lower right-hand corner, Ronaldo, passed away when there was a work zone intrusion due to somebody texting it on his phone. Now these 4 are our employees, but they represent probably over 100 of other employees, your workers, that never returned home to their families this past year due to work zone intrusions. So, as you can read on the slide, highway and street construction workers are at a risk of fatal and serious injury when working in the vicinity of passing motorists and construction vehicles and equipment. Each year, over 100 workers are killed and 20,000 injured in the highway and street construction industry. What is a work zone intrusion? What are we talking about? It's very simple. It's when an unauthorized vehicle or pedestrian enters into a designated work zone, primarily due to speed, distraction, alcohol, drugs, or some point of confusion. This is a picture of the vehicle that struck our 2 employees back in April of this year. Matter of fact, it was during National Work Zone Awareness Week when they passed away. And this was due to a drunk driver. And you can see that the speed was a huge issue as far as that pickup being embedded into our paving machine. Work zone intrusions are also due to distracted driving. And I'm just going to give you a few statistics real briefly. 86% of drivers often eat and drink while they drive. A lot of us on this during this presentation right now may raise our hand as guilty. A lot of us do that, unfortunately. Over a third of the drivers have sent or received text messages. 41% change or play with the GPS system or the radio or read a map. 1 in 5 comb or style their hair. 14% put on makeup. 13% surf the internet while they drive. The younger drivers are more likely to engage in distracted driving. Men are more likely to drive while they're drowsy or drinking, reaching for a map or using the GPS or the internet. But a large percentage of all of us say they know distracted driving is dangerous, but people do it anyway. So what are we doing about it? What can we do about it? And I want to look at this from 2 perspectives, one from a national perspective and then from a local perspective. From a national effort, yes, we do have legislation. I'll talk more about that later. We have public education. We have public service messages and education for teen drivers. And then we work on a national level with our trade associations, just like Road Builders Association or the General Contractors Association or National Asphalt Pavement Association. We'll talk more about these in detail. So from a national effort, legislation. A few years ago, there was a piece of legislation passed called Subpart K. And it sounded like the answer to our prayers in hopes that it would provide for a safer work environment. It had all the components needed to provide a safer work environment for our workers. It talks about enhanced flagger stations and setups for flaggers, intrusion alarms, early warning systems, PACE or pilot vehicles, temporary traffic signals, and a lot of other things that we could do extra to protect our workers and the motoring public coming through our job sites. But unfortunately, Subpart K is hard to enforce. It's up to the local, state agencies, primarily the DOTs, to help us enforce those components as part of Subpart K to improve the safety of our job sites beyond what's complied by the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So that's one effort we can make, is to really get with our Department of Transportations and local state agencies to help utilize what Subpart K was intended for. Public education, like National Work Zone Awareness Week, a lot of information goes out, and you can see by this slide, it talks about texting while you're on the phone. Put down the phone while you're driving. But as you can see, we lost 3 workers during National Work Zone Awareness Week. So we need to do more in that area as well. And then there's also a program for teen drivers that was started by the Road Builders Association here in conjunction with the Federal Highway Administration. And it really hadn't got off its feet yet, but we need to push this hard into the driver education programs. And it helps these new drivers to learn how to drive through safely through work zones. We need to push that harder.
Most of us feel pretty safe when we're at work. But every year, highway and utility workers are injured or killed on the job. That's because drivers aren't careful and don't slow down when they approach work zones. Think about it. How would you like it if someone drove through your workplace at 65 miles an hour? Work zone crews are just doing their job. Stay alert. Stay alive in work zones.
So it's public messages like that that really get the emotional appeal of the public. And we need more of that, because it's that emotional appeal of the motoring public, or our workers may not get to go home to their families at the end of the day. Also, from a national effort, we're working with national trade associations such as the Road Builders Association, Association of General Contractors, National Asphalt Pavement Association, in conjunction with some of the other contractors in the industry, to form, if you will, a consortium to work towards getting with our local Department of Transportation and other local agencies to help enforce legislation like Subpart K, or just educate the local public and the contractors more on extra things that we can do to make the work zone safer, not just for the motoring public, but also for our workers. And that effort started back this past year, April and May, after National Work Zone Awareness Week. We saw a rise in work zone fatalities. So that was what we're doing on a national level. But what about locally? What about in our own yard, at home, in our states, in the areas where we operate? What are we doing there? And some of the areas we're going to briefly talk about is compliance, training, best practices, innovative methods, and then what are we doing with our state association and local Department of Transportations. So when we talk about compliance on a local effort, of course, this is the bare minimum. Using the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and I would hope that everyone seeing and listening to this video understands the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices and knows how that works. But for those of you that don't, it's a standard that gives guidance on the application of signs, channelization devices, and other traffic control devices required to guide travelers safely into and through the work zone. And there's this particular section, Part 6, that addresses temporary traffic control for construction work zones. That's compliance. That's the bare minimum. That's the foundation of which we build upon other efforts that go beyond compliance. Training is also a heavy requirement that we need to do to make sure our workers and the public come through our work zones safely. There's a training program called the Roadway Safety Program. Version 11 is out. It's been out for several years, and it was put together as a consortium with the National Asphalt Pavement Association, Road Builders Association, Labor Union, and some others. It's a very good training program, awareness program for every facet of work zone construction, work zone safety. Night paving, flagging operations, on and on and on. It's a very comprehensive training program that every contractor should utilize to train their employees. But there's also a certain amount of certification that needs to be done as well. And you can see by the slide that ATSA offers certification up for our supervisors, certifying that they are trained and competent to set up and take down lane closures, knowing what's required from the manual and uniform traffic control devices and other things that is required to have that certification. So the training is a big piece we can do as contractors. But one of the most important pieces that we can do is sharing best practices. Our company, Oak Castle Materials, has started a best practice guide of information and methods on how we can prevent work zone intrusions. What are some of these best practices are simple, but they come from our employees who work out there. Ideas from them, those closest to the risk who really should have the most to say about it. And I'm just going to share just a few of these best practices that prevent work zone intrusions. Devices such as fixed and portable barriers, shadow vehicles with attenuators, vehicle arresting systems, rolling lane closures, other protection devices such as early warning systems, which may include rumble strips or air horns or whistles and other ideas. So we challenge you to think outside the box, get our employees to think outside the box to come up with these best practices. Here's just a picture of some of those best practices I just mentioned. Multiple crash trucks that you see there. Air horns on some of our rollers as an early warning system. Rumble strips to alert the incoming traffic that they're coming up on work zones. Simple things like closing the radius at turnouts when we're paving multiple lane highways, as you can see in this diagram, to keep them from turning into our work zone. Mid-lane devices that if they do happen to enter our work zone, then running over cones or barrels or even barricades will alert them to the fact that they're in the work zone, a closed part of the roadway. Using our truck-mounted attenuators for radar to show the speed of vehicles, which is proven to really reduce speed, that is our biggest enemy in work zones is speed. Also, positioning equipment, if we have a breakdown out on the roadway and we can't get the equipment out of the road and we have to repair it, even if it's in the closed lane and in the work zone, we need to protect our workers working on that equipment by placing other pieces of equipment as barriers, protective barriers, so if cars do enter into the work zone, they'll hit that equipment before they get to our employees, and then angle that equipment to where the cars glance off away from our workers. Simple things like this come from our employees that we could do. High visibility safety apparel, of course, is huge. Making sure they can see our workers out on the job site during the daytime and nighttime as well. Personal illumination, lamps for the hard hat, or some type of other reflective devices in excess of the high-vis safety apparel. And then also equipment illumination, making sure our equipment is illuminated in a way that is not confusing but is easily seen so the motoring public can veer away from our equipment. And then innovative methods such as vehicle arrest systems, rolling lane closures. There's a lot of new information out there that we need to try. Maybe not all of it may not work for our applications, but we need to get out there and see what's available to us with the suppliers and even listen to our employees. They may come up with new ways of protecting themselves and the motoring public through our work zones. And then trying those out, and most importantly, communicating and sharing those innovative methods, whether it be signage, as you see here, positive signage about please slow down, my mommy and daddy work here, or it could be a negative reinforcement such as this sign in Missouri says, hit a worker, $10,000 fine. Or other signs that says, hit a worker, go to jail. So these type of signage that gets the traveling public's attention coming through our work zone and causes them to slow down. Last but not least, on a local effort to reduce work zone intrusions, what are we doing with our state associations like our State Road Builders Association? How are we working with them and the DOTs to put these methods into practice so the DOT will allow us to try new things out there to protect our workers and the motoring public? What are we doing there? Are we involved with those local state associations? Do we request approval from the state DOT for additional traffic control devices? Because that's what Subpart K legislation is all about. Do we ask them to lower the speed limit? Do we ask them for additional law enforcement out there? And if so, do we document this through letters to the Department of Transportation or the local government agency that we're working for? It's hard for others to say no regarding the safety of our employees and the motoring public, but we have to ask, and we should document that. So what else can we do? I know we're all competitors that are watching this video right now. Fierce competition, but there's one thing we have in common, and that's the safety and the lives of our employees. So as competitors, we can come together and come up with safer means and methods and processes to work safely out there. So I challenge each of you that are watching this video now to share best practices for the prevention of work zone intrusions so we can all benefit from each other. Encourage your employees to think outside the box. Take action. Speak up, because we need your help to make this safer. We have this national effort that we're doing, but as you well know, the national effort, the gears turn very slowly. But we can make a difference now by sharing best practices. So I challenge it with these best practices and communicating these within our industry. We can come up with an industry-wide best practice guide for the prevention and reduction of work zone intrusions. We can do this by working together. So that's my challenge to you today. If nothing else you've heard, please take serious consideration of sharing some of the best practices you have within your organization from your employees. And let's put together this national work zone intrusion prevention guide based on best practices. To submit your ideas, I've got the names there of Brad Sant and myself, how to contact us by sharing those ideas. It'll take a little time to put this together, but I think it'll be valuable information. So we need your help because they need our help. Going back home to our families every day, sending those employees back home to the kids, their loved ones. That's why we're in this business, is to do that. Thank you very much.